thought I was burying my husband. Turns out I was meeting my replacement. She was standing across from me at the funeral, crying just as hard as I was. And when I saw the little boy holding her hand, a little boy who looked exactly like my husband, I realized my entire marriage was a lie. My name is Claire Montgomery, and for 8 years I thought I had the perfect marriage. A loving husband who traveled for work, a beautiful home, a life I was proud of. But the day Michael died in a car accident, everything I believed shattered, because I wasn't the only widow at that funeral, and his secret family was just the beginning of what I would discover. This is the story of how I learned that the man I slept next to every night was living an entirely different life, how he had another wife, other children, and a web of lies so complex it took me months to untangle. This is about betrayal, investigation, rage, and the moment I stopped being a victim and became someone who demanded the truth. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand who we were to understand how he pulled this off. I met Michael Montgomery 9 years ago at a medical conference in Chicago. I'm a nurse practitioner. He was a pharmaceutical sales rep. Handsome, charming, confident. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. We talked for hours that first night, about medicine, travel, dreams, life. There was an instant connection. He lived in Indianapolis. I lived in Columbus, Ohio, about 2 hours apart. We started dating long distance. He'd drive to see me on weekends. I'd visit him some weeknights. It felt romantic, exciting, like we were making an effort for something real. After 6 months, he proposed. It was fast, but it felt right. He said he didn't want to waste time when he'd found the person he was meant to be with. I said yes without hesitation. We got married in a small ceremony, just close friends and family. His parents had passed away years before, he said. He had no siblings, no close relatives, it was just him. At the time, I thought it was sad. Now I realize it was convenient, fewer people to manage, fewer lies to keep straight. After the wedding, I moved to Indianapolis to be with him. I got a job at a hospital there. We bought a house in a quiet suburb, started building a life together. Michael traveled a lot for work. He was a regional sales manager, he said, covering Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan. He'd be gone 3 or 4 days a week, sometimes more. I hated it, but I understood. It was his job, it paid well. And when he was home, he was completely present, attentive, loving. We'd have date nights, weekend trips. He made me feel cherished. We talked about having kids. I wanted to wait a couple years, get settled in my career, save money. He agreed, said there was no rush. We had our whole lives ahead of us. Looking back now, I see how perfectly he managed it all. The travel schedule gave him the freedom to move between lives. The lack of family meant no one would question inconsistencies. The delayed children meant he could keep both families in separate developmental stages without overlap. He was meticulous, careful, calculated, and I never suspected a thing. Our marriage wasn't perfect. We had arguments like any couple, money stress, scheduling conflicts, nights where he'd come home from a trip exhausted and distant, but nothing that seemed unusual, nothing that made me think he was living a double life. I trusted him completely. When he said he was in Detroit for a conference, I believed him. When he said he couldn't answer the phone because he was in a meeting, I didn't question it. When he said he needed to leave early Sunday morning for a client emergency, I kissed him goodbye and went back to sleep. Trust is a beautiful thing until it's weaponized against you. There were small things looking back that should have raised flags. He never wanted me to surprise him on his trips. He was protective of his phone, always keeping it face down. He had a separate credit card for work expenses that I never saw statements for. He didn't have social media, said he hated it. Our friend group was small and mostly my friends from work. But I explained away all of it. He valued privacy. He was focused on us, not online validation. The work expenses were his company's card. He wanted me to relax at home, not drive hours to sit in a hotel while he worked. I made excuses because I loved him, because I wanted to believe in us, because the alternative was too horrible to consider. The day he died started like any other Wednesday. He'd been gone since Monday on a trip to Michigan. He was supposed to come home that night. I texted him around noon asking what time he'd be back. He said probably around 8. He sent a heart emoji. That was the last message I ever received from him. At 6:47 p.m. my doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. The moment I saw their faces I knew, you just know. They told me Michael had been in a single-car accident on I-69 outside of Fort Wayne. His car had left the road and hit a tree. He died instantly. They were so sorry for my loss. I don't remember much of the next few hours. I remember screaming. I remember calling my best friend Lauren, who rushed over. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. I remember thinking this couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. Michael was only 38 years old. Healthy, careful, how could he just be gone? The police said they'd need me to come identify the body and collect his personal effects. Lauren drove me to the hospital the next morning. I was numb, moving through fog. They took me to a room where Michael's body was. I had to confirm it was him. I looked at his face, peaceful like he was sleeping, and I broke down all over again. Yes, that was my husband. That was Michael. They gave me a bag with his belongings. Wallet, watch, wedding ring, keys, phone. I held his wedding ring in my hand and cried. We'd been married 8 years. He wore this ring every day. Now he was gone and this piece of metal was all I had left. The funeral planning was a blur. Lauren helped me with everything, making calls, choosing a casket, writing an obituary, booking the funeral home. I was on autopilot, just trying to survive each moment. The obituary was simple. Michael James Montgomery, 38, beloved husband, passed away suddenly in a car accident, survived by his loving wife Claire. Service to be held Saturday at Evergreen Funeral Home. I posted it in the local paper, sent it to his company, emailed the few friends and colleagues I had contact information for. And then I waited for Saturday, dreading the moment I'd have to say goodbye forever. The funeral was small. My parents, Lauren, some co-workers from my hospital, a few people from Michael's company, maybe 30 people total. I stood by the casket in a black dress, shaking hands, accepting condolences, hearing the same phrases over and over. I'm so sorry. He was so young. You're in our prayers. I was trying to hold myself together when I noticed her. A woman standing in the back of the room. Dark hair, maybe 35, crying, really crying, not polite funeral tears but deep, wrenching sobs. She had a little boy with her, maybe 6 or 7 years old. He was holding her hand and looking scared. I didn't recognize her, assumed she was a colleague or distant acquaintance. But then she started walking toward me, and I saw her face more clearly. The devastation, the grief, it mirrored my own. She stopped a few feet away and looked at me with red, swollen eyes. She said, "You must be Claire." I nodded. I'm sorry, have we met?" She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She said, "No, we haven't. My name is Angela Montgomery." I blinked. Montgomery. She had the same last name, probably a coincidence, maybe a distant relative Michael never mentioned. I said, "Were you related to Michael?" She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Pity, anger, sadness, all mixed together. She said, "I'm his wife." The room tilted. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense. "Wife," she said, "wife." I said, "I'm sorry, what?" She said, "I'm Michael's wife. We've been married for 10 years. This is our son, Tyler." I looked down at the little boy. He had Michael's eyes, Michael's nose, Michael's dark hair. My brain couldn't process it. This had to be a mistake, a delusion. She was confused, grief-stricken and confused. I said, "That's not possible. I'm Michael's wife. We've been married 8 years. Angela reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She showed me a photo. Michael in a tuxedo standing next to her in a wedding dress. They were kissing. The date stamp on the photo said June 2013, 10 years ago. My wedding was in September 2015, 2 years after theirs. I felt like I was going to throw up. Angela swiped to another photo. Michael holding a newborn baby, then another. Michael at a birthday party with the little boy who was standing in front of me. Another, the 3 of them at a beach, at Christmas, at a park. Hundreds of photos, a whole life, the whole family. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Lauren appeared at my side, asking if I was okay. I couldn't answer. Angela was crying again. She said, "I didn't know about you until yesterday. I saw the obituary. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a different Michael Montgomery. But then I saw the photo and I knew, and I realized he was living with both of us." People were starting to stare, whispers spreading through the room. I needed air. I turned and walked out of the funeral home. Angela followed me. Outside in the parking lot, I turned to face her. I said, "This can't be real. You're lying, I don't know why, but you're lying." She shook her head. "I wish I was. I have a marriage certificate, tax returns, a mortgage in both our names, a son, 8 years of photos and memories. He was my husband, Claire. I loved him, and I had no idea you existed until he died." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, showed her my photos, my wedding, my house, my life with Michael. She looked at them and started crying harder. She said, "How did he do this? How did he live 2 completely separate lives?" I said, "He traveled for work. He was gone all the time." She said, "He told me the same thing. He was gone 3 or 4 days a week, sometimes more." We stared at each other, 2 wives, both in love with the same man, both completely betrayed. Tyler tugged on Angela's sleeve and asked if they could leave. She nodded, wiped her eyes. She said, "We need to talk, figure this out. Can I give you my number?" I nodded numbly. We exchanged numbers. She said, "I'm so sorry, Claire, for all of this." And then she left, took her son and walked away, leaving me standing in the parking lot of my husband's funeral, my entire reality shattered. Lauren found me a few minutes later. I was sitting on the curb, staring at nothing. She said, "Claire, what happened? Who was that woman?" I said, "That was Michael's wife." Lauren said, "What, you're Michael's wife?" I looked at her and said, "Apparently we both are." I couldn't go back inside, couldn't face people, couldn't stand next to Michael's casket and pretend I knew who he was, because I didn't. The man in that casket was a stranger. Lauren drove me home. I sat in my living room, the room I'd shared with Michael, and I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. He had another wife, another family, another entire life. How long had he been planning this? Did he marry me knowing he was already married? Was bigamy even legal? Of course it wasn't, which meant one of our marriages wasn't real, which meant I might not even actually be his widow. The thought made me nauseous. I looked at our wedding photos on the mantel, Michael smiling at me like I was his everything. Was he thinking about her that day, about Angela and Tyler? Was I just a game to him, a challenge? My phone buzzed, a text from Angela. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but we need to figure out the legal stuff, the estate, everything. Can we meet?" I didn't want to meet her, didn't want to see her or her son or be reminded that my husband had built a whole separate family behind my back. But she was right, there would be legal issues, financial issues, Michael's estate would have to be settled, and if we were both married to him, that was going to be complicated. I texted back, "Okay, when?" We agreed to meet the next day at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between Indianapolis and Fort Wayne, where Angela lived. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying every moment of my marriage, looking for clues, looking for the lie. The separate credit card, the protective phone habits, the trips, the schedule that kept him away half the week. He'd been with her when he wasn't with me. For 10 years he'd been juggling 2 wives, 2 homes, 2 lives. And neither of us knew. I thought about confronting his co-workers, demanding answers, but what would I say? "Did you know my husband was a bigamist?" I didn't even know who to ask. I realized I knew almost nothing about his actual job, the names of a few colleagues, the company name, but nothing detailed. Because I trusted him, I didn't interrogate him, I didn't demand proof of his whereabouts, I just believed him. And that trust had been a lie. The next morning I drove to Fort Wayne. The coffee shop was quiet. Angela was already there, sitting in a corner booth. Tyler wasn't with her. She'd left him with a friend, she said. We sat across from each other, 2 women who had nothing in common except a dead husband. Angela started. She told me her story. She met Michael in 2012. He was working in Fort Wayne. They dated for a year, got married in 2013. Tyler was born in 2014. Michael was a good husband, she said, present, loving. He traveled for work, but when he was home, he was all in. They were happy. She had no idea he was living another life. I told her my story, how we met in 2014, dated long distance, married in 2015, built a life in Indianapolis. She was crying by the time I finished. He was with you while Tyler was a baby. While I was up all night breastfeeding and changing diapers, he was dating you. I felt sick. I said, I didn't know. I swear I had no idea. She nodded. I know, neither did I. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Angela said, I went through his things, his home office. I found a second phone, hidden in a drawer. My heart started pounding, and she pulled it out of her purse, an iPhone I'd never seen before. She said, I charged it, opened it, the passcode was Tyler's birthday. She paused. There are text messages, emails, calendar appointments, contacts, everything. She slid the phone across the table. I opened the messages. There were threads with me, with Angela, with names I didn't recognize, work contacts, but also other names, women's names. I clicked on one, Melissa. The messages were flirty, suggestive, plans to meet up. I clicked another, Sarah, same thing. My hands were shaking. He was cheating on both of us. Angela nodded. I found at least 6 different women he was messaging. I don't know if it was just texting or if he actually met up with them, but it was clearly more than just you and me. I felt rage building in my chest. It wasn't enough that he had 2 families. He was also seeing other women on the side. Who was this man? I scrolled through the calendar. It was color-coded, blue for Angela time, green for Claire time, red for work, yellow for I didn't know what yellow was, but there were yellow appointments scattered throughout. I clicked on one, just an address, no other details. Angela said, I looked up some of those addresses. There, I don't know, storage units, office buildings. One was a residential address. I said we should go there, see what they are. She looked hesitant. Is that a good idea? Maybe we should just give all this to a lawyer and let them handle it. I said, I need to know what else he was hiding. She studied my face, then nodded. Okay, let's go. The first address was in Indianapolis, a storage facility on the east side of town. We drove there in Angela's car. I felt numb, disconnected, like this was happening to someone else. We pulled up to the gate. It required a code. I tried Michael's birthday, didn't work. Tried Tyler's birthday, didn't work. Angela said, try your birthday. I punched it in. The gate opened. We drove to unit 247. There was a padlock on it. I didn't have a key. Angela said there were keys on his keychain. The police gave them to me. She pulled them out. We tried a few. One of them fit. We opened the unit. Inside were boxes, filing cabinets, plastic bins. It looked like an office storage space. We started opening boxes. The first one contained files, financial documents, bank statements for accounts I didn't recognize, tax returns that didn't match the ones I'd seen, business registration papers for an LLC I'd never heard of. The second box had more files, legal documents, contracts, invoices. The third box had personal items, photos, awards, a diploma from a university I didn't know Michael attended. Angela picked up one of the photos. Who is this? I looked. It was Michael, younger, maybe in his 20s, with an older couple. His parents, maybe. But Michael told me his parents were dead. I kept digging, found a birth certificate. Michael James Montgomery, born in Lansing, Michigan. Parents, Robert and Susan Montgomery. I pulled out my phone and searched for Robert and Susan Montgomery in Lansing. I found them, an address, a phone number. I called. A woman answered. Hello. I said, is this Susan Montgomery? Yes, who's calling? I took a breath. My name is Claire. I was married to your son, Michael. There was a long pause. Then she said, I don't have a son named Michael. I said, Michael James Montgomery, born in 1985. Another pause. Then quietly, Michael is dead. He died 5 years ago. My blood ran cold. I said, what? She said, my son died of a drug overdose in 2018. We buried him in Lansing. Who is this really? I couldn't speak. I hung up. Angela was staring at me. What did she say? I said, she said her son Michael died 5 years ago. Angela's face went white. That's not possible. I've been married to Michael for 10 years. He didn't die 5 years ago. I said, what if the man we married wasn't really Michael Montgomery? We stared at each other. Angela said, what if he stole someone's identity? We tore through the rest of the storage unit, found more documents, more evidence of a man we didn't know. There was a driver's license with Michael's face but a different name, David Brennan. There was a passport with Michael's face and another name, James Collier. There were credit cards in multiple names, bank accounts in multiple names. We found documents showing he'd changed his name legally from David Brennan to Michael Montgomery in 2012, right before he met Angela. Which meant the real Michael Montgomery had died, and this man, David Brennan, had stolen his identity and built a new life, multiple new lives. I sat down on the concrete floor of the storage unit and tried to process it. The man I married wasn't even who he said he was. His name wasn't Michael. His background was fabricated. His entire existence was a lie. Angela was packing. This is insane. This is completely insane. Who does this? Who steals a dead person's identity and marries multiple women and lives multiple lives? I said a con artist, a sociopath, someone who doesn't care about anyone but himself. I felt numb. The grief I'd felt when I thought Michael died was gone, replaced by rage, by betrayal, by a desperate need for answers. Who was David Brennan? Why did he do this? What was he running from? We kept digging. We found records showing David Brennan had been arrested in 2010 for fraud. He'd been running investment scams, convincing people to give him money for fake business opportunities. He'd served 2 years in prison. After he got out, he disappeared, changed his name, became Michael Montgomery, and started over. But why the two families? Why the double life? We found financial records that gave us the answer. He was still running cons. He had multiple businesses registered under different names. He was taking out loans using our credit, using our homes as collateral, funneling money through shell companies. He'd married Angela and me not because he loved us, but because we were useful. We gave him legitimacy, credit, access. We were marks, both of us. I wanted to scream, to break something, to hurt him the way he'd hurt us. But he was already dead. I couldn't confront him, couldn't demand answers, couldn't make him pay. Angela was crying. He used us, we were just tools to him. I said, we need to go to the police, report all of this. He stole identities, committed fraud. There has to be legal recourse. She nodded, and we need to protect ourselves. If he took out loans in our names, if he used our credit, we could be liable for his debts. We took photos of everything in the storage unit, loaded the most important documents into Angela's car, and we drove to the police station. The detective we spoke to listened to our story with increasing disbelief. He took notes, asked questions, looked through the documents we brought. He said, this is complicated. Identity theft, fraud, bigamy. We'll need to open an investigation. It's going to take time. I said, we need to protect ourselves financially. He took out loans, opened credit accounts. We didn't authorize any of it. The detective said, you'll need to contact the credit bureaus, freeze your credit, file fraud reports with the banks, get a lawyer. We left the police station and immediately started making calls. Credit bureaus, banks, lawyers. Over the next few days, we discovered the full extent of the damage. Michael, or David, or whatever his real name was, had racked up over $300,000 in debt in Angela's name. He'd taken out a second mortgage on her house, opened a dozen credit cards, taken out personal loans. He'd done similar to me, not quite as much, about $150,000 in fraudulent debt, but still devastating. Both of our credit scores were destroyed. We were facing collections, foreclosure, bankruptcy. And the man responsible was dead. Angela and I became reluctant allies. We worked together to untangle the financial mess, to file police reports, to gather evidence. We spent hours going through that storage unit, through the secret phone, through his laptop that Angela found hidden in their house. We discovered he'd been running romance scams online, pretending to be different people, convincing women to send him money. There were dozens of them, maybe more. We found records of cash transactions, offshore accounts. He'd been moving money around, hiding assets. We found evidence that he'd done this before, in other states, under other names. We weren't his first victims. We probably weren't his last. The man we thought we knew didn't exist. He was a ghost, a fabrication, a predator. And we'd fallen for it completely. I had to tell my parents, my friends, my co-workers. I had to explain that my husband wasn't who I thought he was, that our marriage might not even be legal, that I was drowning in debt from fraud I didn't commit. The humiliation was crushing. People looked at me with pity, some with suspicion. How could you not know? How could you be that blind? I asked myself the same questions. How did I not see it? Were there signs I missed? Was I stupid, naive? My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who I started seeing after the funeral, said it wasn't my fault. That con artists are experts at deception, that they exploit trust and love, that I was a victim, not a fool. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like I'd been an idiot, like I'd ignored obvious red flags because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. Angela felt the same way. We'd talk on the phone late at night, both of us unable to sleep, processing the trauma. She'd say, I keep thinking about all the times he lied to my face. When Tyler would ask where Daddy was and Michael would say he was working, he was with you, or with one of the other women, and I just believed him. I'd say, I keep thinking about our anniversary. He'd take me on these romantic trips. Were those trips real, or was he just managing his schedule so he could be with me for a few days without you noticing? We were both grieving, not for the man we lost, but for the life we thought we had, for the future we'd imagined, for the version of ourselves that still trusted and hoped and believed. About a month after the funeral, the police investigation revealed more. David Brennan, his real name, had a criminal history going back 20 years. Fraud, identity theft, forgery. He'd been in and out of prison multiple times. He'd had other families before us, a wife in Florida in the early 2000s, another in Arizona. He'd scammed them the same way, married them, used their credit, disappeared when things got too complicated. But this time he hadn't disappeared. He'd stayed, juggled two families for years, built an elaborate system to keep the lies going. Why, the police theorized he'd gotten older, smarter, more careful. He'd learned from past mistakes, figured out how to sustain the con long term. Or maybe he just enjoyed it, the power, the control, the thrill of getting away with it. We'd never know. He took his reasons to the grave. The financial recovery was brutal. Both Angela and I had to hire lawyers, file fraud claims, go through bankruptcy proceedings. I lost the house, couldn't afford the mortgage, especially with the second one Michael had taken out without my knowledge. I moved into a small apartment, started over with almost nothing. Angela managed to keep her house, but only barely. She had family who helped, a support system I didn't have. We both had to testify in legal proceedings, face creditors, prove we were victims of fraud. It was exhausting, demoralizing, humiliating. But slowly we started to rebuild. I threw myself into work, picked up extra shifts, focused on saving money, paid down debt, fixed my credit. Angela did the same. She also started a blog about her experience, about surviving a con artist, about healing from betrayal. It resonated with people. She started getting messages from other victims, other people who'd been scammed by romantic partners, who'd discovered secret families, who'd been destroyed by lies. She asked if I wanted to share my story on her blog. I said yes. Writing it out was cathartic. Painful but cathartic. I didn't hold back. I wrote about the discovery, the devastation, the anger, the shame, the slow process of healing. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments, people sharing their own stories, thanking me for being honest, for making them feel less alone. One comment stood out. A woman named Jennifer said she'd been married to a man named David Brennan in the late 2000s. He'd scammed her out of her life savings. She thought she was the only one. Reading my story made her realize she was part of a pattern. I reached out to Jennifer. We talked on the phone. She told me her story. It was eerily similar to mine and Angela's, the whirlwind romance, the lies, the financial devastation. She connected me with two other women, Rachel and Patricia. Both had been involved with David Brennan under different names at different times. We formed a group, 5 women who'd been victimized by the same man. We shared information, supported each other, helped each other heal. It was strange. We should have been strangers, but we were bonded by shared trauma. We understood each other in a way no one else could. Through our collective investigations, we uncovered even more. David Brennan had children with at least 3 different women. Tyler wasn't his only son. There were others, kids who'd grown up with a father who was barely present, who lied constantly, who disappeared without explanation. We found evidence of more fraud, more scams, more victims. The The scope of his crimes was staggering. We compiled everything, gave it to the FBI. They opened a federal investigation. Even though David was dead, they wanted to identify all his victims, help them get restitution if possible, bring closure. I testified to federal investigators, gave depositions, turned over documents. It was exhausting, but it also felt like justice, like his crimes were finally being acknowledged, like we were finally being believed. About 6 months after Michael's death, I still sometimes called him Michael even though I knew that wasn't his real name. I got a call from a lawyer. He said he was representing the estate of David Brennan. There were assets that needed to be distributed to his heirs and creditors. I said I wasn't interested. I didn't want anything from that man. The lawyer said I should reconsider. There was a life insurance policy. Michael had taken it out years ago. The beneficiary was listed as spouse, which technically meant both Angela and I could claim it. The policy was for $500,000. I called Angela, told her about the insurance. She said, "I don't want his money." I said, "Neither do I, but we both have massive debts because of him. This could help us recover." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You're right, we didn't ask for this, but we deserve to rebuild." We worked with the lawyer. The insurance company initially resisted paying out because of the bigamy and fraud, but our lawyers argued that we were both victims, that we'd entered into the marriages in good faith, that we deserved the payout. It took months of legal battles, but eventually the insurance company agreed. They split the payout between Angela and me, $250,000 each. It wasn't about the money, it was about justice, about taking back some of what he'd stolen from us. I used the money to pay off the fraudulent debts, to rebuild my credit, to save for a down payment on a new house, to start over. Angela did the same. She also put some aside for Tyler's college fund. She wanted him to have opportunities despite the chaos his father had caused. Tyler was struggling. He was seeing a therapist, trying to process the fact that his father wasn't who he thought he was, that his father had other families, that his father was a criminal. Angela said the therapist recommended honesty, age-appropriate honesty. Tyler deserved to know the truth, to understand that none of this was his fault, that his father's choices didn't define him. I thought about that a lot, how the children were innocent victims in all this. Tyler, the other kids David had fathered, they didn't ask to be born into a web of lies. They deserved better. I also thought about the other women, the ones from the romance scams, the ones who'd sent money to a man they thought loved them, the ones who'd never even met him in person but had been manipulated and exploited. We tried to find as many as we could, to let them know they weren't alone, to connect them with resources, to help them heal. Some of them were grateful, others were too ashamed to engage. The shame of being scammed is powerful. It makes you want to hide, to pretend it never happened. But hiding doesn't help, talking about it does, connecting with others who understand does. That's why Angela's blog became so important. It gave people a place to share their stories without judgment, to find community, to heal together. I started contributing more, writing articles about red flags, about protecting yourself financially, about rebuilding after betrayal. It felt good to turn the pain into something useful, to help others avoid what we'd gone through, to create meaning from the chaos. About a year after Michael's death, I started dating again. It was terrifying. I didn't trust my judgment anymore. How could I after being so thoroughly deceived? But my therapist encouraged me to try. She said not all men are con artists, that I could learn to trust again. Slowly, carefully. I met someone through a friend. His name was Tom. He was a teacher. Kind, patient, honest, nothing flashy or too good to be true, just solid and real. We took things slow, really slow. I was upfront about my past, about the fraud, the fake marriage, the trauma. I figured if he ran, better to know now. He didn't run, he listened. He asked questions, he was compassionate without being condescending. We dated for months before I let him meet my friends, before I introduced him to my parents, before I let myself imagine a future with him. And even then I was cautious. I checked his background, verified his identity, made sure he was who he said he was. It felt paranoid, but it also felt necessary. Trust had to be earned, not given blindly. Tom understood. He was patient with my trust issues, my need for transparency. He gave me access to his phone, his finances, his life, not because I demanded it, but because he wanted me to feel safe. Slowly, I started to believe in the possibility of a healthy relationship, of real love, of a partner who didn't have hidden agendas. Angela was dating too. She'd met someone at a support group for fraud victims. They bonded over shared trauma, started as friends, became more. We'd talk about our new relationships, about the challenges of trusting again, about the fear that it might all be another lie. But we also talked about hope, about the fact that we survived, that we were stronger than we'd been before, that we deserved happiness. 2 years after Michael's death, the FBI closed their investigation. They'd identified over 40 victims of David Brennan's scams, recovered some assets, helped people file for restitution. It wasn't perfect justice. David was dead, so there was no trial, no criminal conviction, no prison sentence. But there was acknowledgement, validation. The government officially recognized that we'd been victims of sophisticated fraud, that it wasn't our fault, that we deserved support. That meant more than I expected it to. I also got closure in another way. I visited the real Michael Montgomery's grave in Lansing, Michigan. I brought flowers, stood by his headstone, apologized for the fact that someone had stolen his name, his identity, used it for terrible things. I told him I hoped he was at peace, that his family had been kind when I explained what happened, that they didn't blame me for the desecration of their son's memory. It was a strange experience, mourning someone I never knew, but it felt important, like honoring the real Michael meant acknowledging that the man I married was a fiction. I also visited David Brennan's grave. It was in a cheap cemetery on the outskirts of Fort Wayne. No headstone, just a flat marker with his name and dates. I stood there and tried to feel something, anger, sadness, anything. But I felt nothing. He'd taken so much from me, but I wasn't going to give him any more of my emotional energy. I said out loud, "You didn't break me. You tried, but you didn't win." And then I walked away. Angela and I still talk regularly. We'll probably always be connected by what we went through. In a weird way, she's one of my closest friends. We understand each other in a way no one else can. We joke sometimes about starting a podcast, The Secret Family Survivors, sharing our story, helping others who have been through similar situations. Maybe we will someday. For now, the blog is enough. Tom and I got engaged last month. It was a quiet proposal. No grand gestures, just the two of us on a hike. Him asking if I'd build a life with him, me saying yes. It's different this time. I'm different. I don't trust blindly. I don't ignore red flags. I protect myself while also opening my heart. It's a balance, and it's not always easy, but it's real, and that matters more than anything. I think about Michael David sometimes. Wonder what he thought about when he was alone. Did he feel guilty? Did he ever care about any of us? Or were we just objects to him? Tools, means to an end. I'll never know, and I've made peace with that. What I do know is this: I survived. Against impossible odds, against crushing betrayal, against a man who tried to destroy me for his own gain, I survived. And I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm thriving. I have a career I love, friends who support me, a partner who respects me, a future I'm building on my own terms. That's the real victory. Not revenge, not seeing him punished, but reclaiming my life, my identity, my power. He took a lot from me: years, money, trust, peace of mind. But he didn't take everything. He didn't take my resilience, my strength, my ability to rebuild. And in the end, that's what matters. If you're reading this and you've discovered a secret family, or been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, I want you to know, you will survive this. It doesn't feel like it right now. The pain is overwhelming, the shock is paralyzing, the questions are endless. But you are stronger than you know, and you will get through this. Here's what I learned. First, it's not your fault. Con artists are professionals at deception. They study human psychology. They exploit trust and love. The fact that you were fooled doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. Second, get help. Therapy, legal advice, financial counseling, support groups. You can't do this alone, and you don't have to. Third, document everything. Every lie, every transaction, every piece of evidence. You'll need it for legal proceedings, and it helps you see the truth when you're tempted to make excuses for them. Fourth, protect yourself financially. Freeze your credit, monitor your accounts, check for fraudulent debts. These predators often use their victims' credit and resources. Fifth, tell your story, not to everyone, but to people who will understand and support you. Shame thrives in silence. Speaking out breaks its power. Sixth, give yourself time. Healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel strong, other days you'll fall apart. That's normal. Be patient with yourself. Seventh, don't let it destroy your ability to trust. Yes, be cautious. Verify, protect yourself, but don't close your heart completely. There are good people out there. Real love exists. You deserve it. Eighth, remember that their actions don't define your worth. Just because someone treated you as disposable doesn't mean you are. You are valuable, worthy, deserving of love and respect. Finally, know that you will rebuild. It takes time, it's hard, but you will create a life that's even better than what you had before, because it will be built on truth, on self-respect, on strength. I'm Claire Montgomery. That's still my legal name. I kept it even though it's associated with a lie, because I decided that I get to define what that name means, not him. And it means survivor, fighter, someone who refused to be broken. This is my story. It's painful, it's messy, it's not the fairy tale I thought I was living. But it's real, it's mine, and I'm proud of how it ends. Not with a perfect marriage or a tidy resolution, but with me standing on my own, whole, healed, ready for whatever comes next. That's the power of survival, not just enduring, but emerging stronger. Michael David, whoever he was, he's gone. His lies are exposed, his victims are healing. And I'm still here, still standing, still living. That's my revenge, that's my justice. Living well, living honestly, living freely. He tried to make me a victim, but I chose to become a survivor. And if you're going through something similar, you can make that choice too. Choose to survive, choose to heal, choose to rebuild. Choose yourself, because you're worth it. And no one can take that from you, no matter how hard they try.